Jacksonville Jaguars are creating competition, and I love it. I'll tell you the 10 guys that I believe have the most to prove as this season approaches. We'll do it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That is right. It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars, and we thank you for making us your first listen. I am Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast that you can find on our YouTube page. Just head on over. Make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button as well, and then hit that bell so you get notifications each and every time we drop an episode. Also, wherever you get your podcast that you listen to audio-wise, make sure you go to wherever you listen to those podcasts every single day and check in so you don't miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to, but the summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. And shout out to the everydayers for joining us every single day. And you can be one. All you got to do is join us here every single day. All right, let's get to it, man. I sat and thought about this for a long time. The Jaguars, as you know, the difference between the 2023 post 2023 season, off season, and last year, the difference is they didn't rest. The Jaguars did not rest. They wanted to bring in as much competition as possible. So it's making it really difficult to find a 53, a much too early 53 that I believe that they're going to be able to field this year. I think some good guys are going to be let go. So I had to come up with 10 guys that I don't necessarily believe they're going to be let go. So I want to make sure that's clear. I'm not saying that these guys are fighting for their NFL life here, right? But they do have something to prove. They have something to prove. Like, who are they? What are they going to be? Are they going to be a part of the Jaguars' future? Some of them may be free agents. Some of the positions are duplicated and some of the spots are duplicated because those guys are actually battling each other. I think what I really want to come across and what I really want to get across today is this. The team is looking for an identity. There are going to be players that have to step into certain roles. Some of them are competing with each other for those jobs, right? All of this is going to create the type of friction that I believe leads to sort of that iron versus iron theory, where practice and making a team is harder than actually playing in the games. Competition creates that friction that causes the combustion that leads to the propulsion. That's the example that I used last week. And there are some guys that are in some really, really tough situations, right? Where it's either put up or shut up time. And I'm going to start with a couple of them, right? By the time we finish this show, though, we're going to find out if the positions are the deciding factors for those rosters, right? Before that, in segment 2, we'll tell you why those positions that they play, it matters. It matters because sometimes teams don't keep certain people, like certain numbers when it comes to building that 53-man roster up. Can you, as a 6 wide receiver, be so good that the team can't cut you and they got to keep you? Can you be a 4th tight end that catches and blocks and that gives you more value than a guy that might do one of those things better than you? The fact that you have that versatility. All of these things will factor. How many offensive linemen will they keep? And will they keep guys that can play guard and tackle as opposed to just guys who are playing tackle? So let's dive right into it. I want to start on the defense. I'm going to do 5 players on the defense. It's going to bleed from segment 1 and segment 2. And then in segment 2, we'll start the offense, and then we'll finish when we get to segment 3. Here we go. On defense, this is going to blow your mind, man, when I tell you this, because there are 3 dudes here fighting to see who's going to be on the field a whole lot. I'm going to go with Chad Muma, Ventrell Miller to start. And I'm going to park right here. Who's going to be the third contributor? Ventrell has to stay healthy, and we know that, but I think he is very, very talented. He's the kind of dude that if you describe him in basketball terms, he'd be that guy that plays like the old man game. Like he's smart. He knows exactly what he's supposed to be doing. Maybe not the most athletic dude in the world, not the biggest guy in the world, but he has a navigation system where he plays this game the way the old school players played it, and he dissects plays. Ventrell Miller was really in college, and I know this is sacrilegious to a lot of people. He was almost everything in college, if he could have stayed healthy, that folks thought Nakobe Dean was. A leader and just a football playing Mike linebacker who knows how to get out. But he's got a lot to prove. He looks different. His body looks different. If there's one person that is really, there's a couple on this list that I believe have really benefited from the strength and conditioning off season. He is definitely one of them, right? So he has a lot to prove. And the thing with him and Muma is, Muma's had some opportunities as well. Chad Muma's had some opportunities as well. Even when they got Foye Oluokun in free agency that same year, Devin Lloyd was in and out. And at some point, Muma replaced Lloyd in one of the games. I believe it was the Kansas City game. Chad Muma started getting a lot more run. It still has not materialized. I think the change in scheme will eventually allow one of these dudes to take the lead over the other. That is if Ventrell is healthy. So I'm going to go to the third guy, and this is the one that's going to blow your mind. I got Devin Lloyd in here. Now, Devin Lloyd is in a different position, and he has something to prove in a different way. So many people have raved about how Devin Lloyd's setup looks, his body, and what he's done, and that's the other thing that I want to talk about when I mentioned how Ventrell Miller has changed. Devin Lloyd has really taken the offseason very, very seriously as well. But the thing that Devin Lloyd, he's not battling whether or not he's going to make the team. He's not battling whether or not he's going to be in the rotation. Devin Lloyd is a starter on this football team. I think with Devin Lloyd, what he has to prove is, what is he? At some point, is he the star that everyone thought he was? He's had a little bit of the Quay Walker kind of existence here. Quay Walker, his former team, not his former teammate, his draft mate, that got picked up by Green Bay, and I thought the Jaguars are actually going to double up on Georgia players that year. That's the year that they took Trayvon Walker. It is going to be very, very interesting to watch how Devin Lloyd plays this season in this new scheme. Is he going to get turned loose? Because if he turns out to be like a star, then the Jaguars defense really, really goes up. If he just turns out to be just a guy, even with this new system, then we're going to start having lower expectations about what he is for the future. And eventually you're going to start seeing them try to probably replace him as well because he just hadn't panned out. They want Devin Lloyd. You don't trade up back into the first round to get a guy unless you want him to be a star. So that's 3 linebackers. We're going to make it 4. And I'm going to tell you who it is, but we're going to talk about it in segment 2. It's my man, Yasir Abdullah. He has something to prove. I think he's chomping at the bit to prove it. I just don't think he had a whole bunch of opportunity to be able to do it. I'm going to talk about how a scheme change can help him, and we'll see if he can be the guy that could get some minutes in this new defensive system. We'll talk about it all in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Hang in there. And we got to tell you about FanDuel, man. That's right. Playoffs are over in a lot of sports. Game 7 in the NHL. Woo! I love me some sports, man. I love them so much I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games. And the sports aren't sporting like I want them to, but FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Make sure you tap into FanDuel. The offseason ain't the offseason at FanDuel, man. All summer long, all customers with a boost or a bump daily. Segment number 2 here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. Thanking you all for making us your first listen. Talking about 10 players that are ready to rise or be risen over here in this new season. Yasir Abdullah is the name that I mentioned prior to us going to break, and I mentioned it for a good reason. That young man has a lot of talent. He's 6'1", around 6'1", around 250 pounds, can run like the wind, was a real productive player in college. What is he? Is he going to be an edge rusher? Is he going to be an outside linebacker in a 4-3? Is he going to play a little bit more of the Sam role? Or is he just going to be a football player that they find a way to put him on the field and let him just go do what he does at critical points in the game? I think it's the latter. I think he's a dude that's going to have a lot of energy, that can run sideline to sideline, that can tackle, also that can find his way to the quarterback. Maybe like play the Arnold Ebiketie role that the defensive coordinator, Ryan Nielsen, had Arnold Ebiketie playing up in Atlanta. Now, Ebiketie's a little bigger, probably 2 inches taller, and probably weigh about the same. Maybe has a little bit of different arm length. But I do think coming into camp, Yasir Abdullah, they picked him for a reason, and he's here. And he wasn't on the practice squad. The dude was on the roster last year. I think he has a shot to come in here and impress this new coaching staff. Really, I really do. I just think guys need to just let the guys play that are going to get the job done, as opposed to playing dudes that you want to get the job done because you have invested in them. So I look at Yasir Abdullah as a dude that I think has a little bit of something to prove and is going to have a chance to prove that thing and see if he can stick around on the 53-man roster. Even if he doesn't, trust me, that he's the type of player that will find a home in the National Football League. But of course, we want him to play here in Jacksonville. My third guy is my fifth guy on the defense is Darnell Savage. And the reason why I say Darnell Savage has something to prove, he's guaranteed. He knows why he came here. The team knows why they brought him here. Fans obviously don't. Yasir Abdullah Darnell Savage was talked about, he ain't going to start. They're going to start this guy, or they're going to start that guy, or he's going to be a backup safety. And I'm thinking, like, you don't go out on the first couple of days of free agency and sign a dude to the type of money they signed him to when you already let a guy go who was the starter without thinking that he's going to come in here and play. I believe Darnell Savage, I keep thinking about my man Yasir. I believe Darnell lines up at nickelback from day one. I think he lines up at that spot where they didn't draft the Branch kid out of Alabama a couple of years ago. I think Savage kind of plays that way. Even though he didn't play that way, he wasn't lined up in that spot all the time in Green Bay. And most people think he's just like a free safety type or somebody that can float from the back end to the front. I think the Jaguars have done their scouting, and I believe that they picked him to come in here and play the nickel position. That is exactly what they have said. I have heard that before. So I think he's going to start, because I think Antonio Johnson is going to start opposite of Andre Cisco. So look for that to be something that is answered. Is he going to be able to play full-time slot, full-time nickel, and guard wide receiver, sometimes the slot receiver, or the tight ends from the other teams, and even play deep enough to keep things from happening, but also play shallow enough to be able to tackle people out in the flat. So that's going to be a very, very big thing that we need to watch. And I don't think it's something that he has to prove to himself or the team. I think he has to show the fans exactly what his value is. So one of the biggest things with Darnell Savage is, and probably Yasir Abdullah too, is the position that they play, the type of numbers that they're going to keep. I don't think Savage is in any trouble, obviously. Yasir, where's he going to play? And we talked about how important the positions they play matter when it comes to this. Where does he play? Is it going to be as an outside linebacker? Is it going to be as just a pseudo edge rusher? Is he somebody you can send up the A gap when they go to a little bit of sort of a freak defense where you might have 2 guys down and 4 guys standing up all over the place? I have seen tape where they have done things like that. So unleashing his athleticism behind those tall guys will really allow Yasir Abdullah to be able to make some plays. In terms of Savage, I think he is a slot. That's what I think he is. People, you can call it a slot safety, a slot corner, or nickelback, whatever you want to call it. I think he's going to be right there. He's going to be close to the line of scrimmage, and he's going to, if there's only 2 wide receivers, I think you see him move around and float a little bit to the point where he has an advantage. May even squeeze down and do a little bit of blitzing, right? Let's get to the offense. On the offense, the only time the position really matters, in my opinion, is when you deal with the offensive line, or when you deal with, like, for instance, the tight end position, what type of tight end is it? I think versatility wins out when you're talking about the third or the fourth guy. I think you can be a one-trick pony and be that deep on the depth chart. If you're a one-trick pony, you better be a starter as that one-trick pony. But if you're on the depth chart, if you're a little bit down on the depth chart, then guess what that means? That means that you have to be versatile. That's when they start looking for Swiss Army knives, guys that can do multiple things. And all of these guys are going to have to also be able to play special teams, even if it's just in the kicking game. You're going to have to add more value to your name if you're one of those fringe players. But let's start at the top. I'm going to start with somebody who is probably on my thumbnail today because he's looked so good. And he was an afterthought because this team went out and added 3 wide receivers between free agency and the draft. That is Parker Washington, the second-year wide receiver from Penn State. You want to talk about somebody who has continued to transform their body and become a more explosive player. He's one of those thick-legged guys who's short, so sometimes last year he looked a little heavy-legged, right? Especially when you see him in training camp when guys got tired. He looks totally different now, man. I mean, you want to talk about, he's still the same muscular dude with the big trunks, but the thing is with him, he just looks way more explosive. And the way that he was running around in the mini camps, it's almost like, oh, y'all forgot about me. Well, watch this. Let me show you. He elevates the catch passes. He gets in and out of his breaks. And this is the thing that I was speaking about when I was speaking about his versatility. He can play inside and he can play outside. He can do whatever. Because even though he's 5'10", 5'11", he actually fights for the ball and is able to jump and catch a lot of passes. Parker Washington is going to make the Jaguars either make a difficult decision to cut him, because I think he's the fourth guy, and I think he's going to probably try to challenge a little bit and take some people's lunch money. So it's either him or Devin Duvernay, whoever you want to think is fourth or fifth. But then you got to hold off those dudes behind you. I think he's not only going to hold them off, I think he's going to be the put me in coach guy. And they're going to have to find a way to get Parker Washington some snaps, because I really do believe he has transformed his body, which may eventually transform the way he plays. We're going to get into some offensive linemen and tight ends. I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to have a little bit of debate about Cooper Hodges and Walker Little. And then the main one is Brenton Strange or Luke Farrell. Who, out of those guys, those are the guys that are going to round out the 10. I'm going to tell you my position on them in just a second on Locked On Jaguars. I first have to let you know about Locked On Sports Today, because if you're watching Fox Sports or TV all day and you got to turn down the volume when that shouting starts, then make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm going to discuss 4 more players out of the 10 that I think are ready to rise or either ready to be risen past. We're going to do that in segment number 3 here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. And the sky has opened up, and these streets are getting a bath. I wonder if you hear the raindrops, but it is storming here north of the airport here in Jacksonville. But we've named 6 of the 10 players that I believe are going to be involved in some interesting battles, all for different reasons, when the training camp, 2024 training camp, and the Jacksonville Jaguars start trying to trim their guys down. Now, I will tell you this. I'm going to give you an honorable mention. Tyler Lacey was an honorable mention because he's another dude that's worked his butt off and didn't allow his draft status to determine his future. He's gotten in the gym. He has worked his butt off, and the strength and conditioning people have pointed it out. I've heard coaches rave about him. The defensive line coaches have raved about him. Can he be one of those guys that you say, we just can't let him go, man, and we got to keep him around? Depth piece. He's a second-year player out of Oklahoma State, fourth round pick, I believe. Those are just valuable players, especially if you need depth pieces. The problem is that you only have 53 spots. Where does he play? Big end, 3 technique. Can he do both? That versatility will allow the Jaguars to make a very, very good decision. And the more guys you have that can do multiple things, it starts allowing you to keep guys that you really want to keep and at other positions. So we talked about Chad Muma, Ventrell Miller, Devin Lloyd, Yasir Abdullah, Darnell Savage, and Parker Washington. So let's get down and dirty in the trenches with Cooper Hodges and Walker Little, because that's number 7 and number 8 on the top 10 list as far as guys that have a story that has to be told in training camp. What is this Walker Little's last season? Can he play well enough that they say, you know what, we're going to Ezra Cleveland him a contract and tell him just hang in there, and maybe by the end of the year or trade deadline, maybe Cam goes, and then they'll have a less expensive option at left tackle, or perhaps maybe finally let him live up to his promise and move him to right tackle. Remember, he was in 2021, he was a first-round pick, right? Same draft as Trevor. So what do we do? Do we keep him? Do we develop him and let somebody else get him? The way I tell you, a name that I remember is Connor Williams. I remember when he was picked. I remember when the Williams kid was picked out of Alabama in Cincinnati. They had to go to another stop. Connor Williams is in Dallas, and then he ended up in Miami. And he ended up on All-Pro. That's the fear, that when you draft a guy high and you develop him, and then he leaves your program after 1 year and doesn't get another after one contract and doesn't get another one, that he goes somewhere else and they're able to put the finger on that Midas touch and figure it out. And that's like a slap in the face to your development. But I think he has to show them something. But he's going to have an opportunity to do it. And his versatility helps him. Cooper Hodges, another player. Could Cooper Hodges be like the dude that all of these dudes better be fearing, because he's versatile too? He can play guard and he can play center. Cooper Hodges might be a bigger problem for Luke Fortner than he is anybody else, because if he can provide backup depth at center and his energy and the way that he plays, he's another one that I noticed how quick and powerful he looked in the minicamp. Cooper Hodges he's going to have his story. He's going to have a day to tell his story. He's one of those 10 stories that have to be told in training camp. It's also something that we have to pay attention to, that they didn't address the interior other than Mitch Morse. They didn't go and get like the kid Mahogany out of Boston College, or the kid out of UConn that I was so crazy about. They didn't do any of that stuff. They really stood pat on their guards. They re-signed Ezra Cleveland. They restructured Brandon Sheriff, and they got their guy. Okay, and that's Cooper Hodges. They really like him. He better show up and show out in training camp, because folks are going to point out that they could have drafted, especially with all the picks they had, that they could have picked another interior offensive line, but that's not something that they did. Finally, the last two, I'm grouping them together, but they're going to count as number 9 and number 10, and that is Brenton Strange and Luke Farrell. What's going to happen with Brenton Strange? Second-round pick in the 2023 draft and didn't get much done. I heard he looks a lot better. He wasn't somebody that I paid attention to in minicamp. I heard he looks a lot better. I heard, that they believe things are going to get better. You're going to see more from him this year. My question is, how can you see more with all of these receivers, all of the backs that have to touch the ball? And then you got Evan freaking Ingram right there, who's a wide receiver in a tight end's body. How's he going to really ever live up to being a guy who's picked in the second round? That is a huge, huge question moving forward with Brenton Strange, especially if, like, his old teammate Theo Johnson comes into the league as a rookie and he takes off, and it's like you took the wrong dude the wrong year at Penn State. You shouldn't have done that. I even had somebody ask me, do you think they did that by mistake? No, I don't think that they took the wrong guy by mistake. No, they don't do that. They don't. Trust me, NFL scouts are in depth, way more in depth. They do not do that. But now Luke Farrell showed up last year and looked good as both a blocker and a pass catcher. Could Luke Farrell be a dude that the Jaguars extend and keep as a tight end 2/tight end 3, and Brenton Strange be the odd man out, or he's tight end 3 trying to fight and hold on to his job? I think it's very, very possible that could happen. He has to show something. I look at the tight end depth, and obviously got Evan Ingram on the sheet that I'm looking at. Luke Farrell is number 2. Brenton Strange is 3. I don't know if they have anybody, maybe Josh Peterson. Do they have anybody that could really challenge Strange at the 3? But even if Brenton Strange stays tight end 3 on the depth chart, if folks are going to look at that as that's going to be a busted draft pick. Your second year in, you picked in the second round. It was the high end of the second round, like right in the middle of the second round. You just got to, at some point, you can't have your second year, and you're the only one sort of like you. You're not like the starter and Evan Ingram, who's really a move tight end. You're the guy that's going to be in there when you need to, at the very least, when they go to their package of 2 tight ends and 1 running back, you need to be the guy that's on the field. If you're not in your second year on the field and you were a second round pick, then that's a busted out pick. So those are the guys that I believe have a lot to say in training camp. They're going to have a lot to say about how good this team could be. And some of the deciding factors, again, will be the positions on the roster, the versatility that the guys play. How much more can they do than just the one thing? Like, take the best thing that they do and say, okay, well, how good is that? And then, okay, what else do you have to offer? There's going to be a lot, especially for the wide receiver, running back, DB types with these new rules. Guys are going to have to be able to tackle differently in special teams. That may be the calling card, the bell cow for a lot of people to be able to remain on rosters this season. Either way, this is why I'll summarize and I'll conclude with this. This is why I believe the Jaguars are getting better, because it is hard once you get to pick player number 45. Those last 8 to 10 picks, those are very, very difficult things to figure out. And I know a lot of people are like, man, you ain't say nothing about the DBs. I talked about them already before. It's going to be a dogfight. There are going to be good football players that aren't going to make this team. And I think Jaguar fans should be prepared for it. Man, it felt good to talk about this today because, we got a little while till training camp comes, but it's going to come right after the 4th of July. Watch how quickly it gets here. Y'all going to love it. Look, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Man, y'all take care of each other. Please be safe out here in this weather today. And we'll see you next time here on Locked On Jaguars.